And your advisor can only help you minimize, structure ways to minimize the taxation if they know about the situation. Because there are lots of ways, like for this client, the Indian client, there was a simple way to address it upon, through his mother's plans. But if we hadn't known about it, it would have been too late till the assets were got into his name, and then all of a sudden he had a tax problem. And then also, once the government knows you have that there, they want to know a lot more about it. So if there are ways to, in this situation, put it into an entity that wasn't required to report to the U.S., the government didn't know about it and didn't ask any other questions.
I'll give you a great example that was a lot in the news last summer, Peter. There was a court case that ended up with the Supreme Court about what you have to disclose from a reporting income from income overseas. Now, if you own more than 20% of an overseas corporation, even if you're not taking distributions and that company is profitable, your piece of that company will have a pari passu obligation on the income. So even though they weren't receiving distributions from their company, they were still subject to U.S. taxation. And so, like I said, the devil really is in the details. So we always tell clients, no matter who you're working with, the more information that you can give, the better it is. And like I said, as long as you're reporting it and you're planning for it appropriately, doesn't mean that you're going to have a large tax consequence. It just means, again, we're going to use this word a lot today, planning, and dealing with that once you have the information available to you. That is so. And Paul was talking about assets as well. Understanding you could have, for example, $1,000 S&P 500 Spider ETF. This is a typical thing that a lot of Americans have. There's nothing cute about it. It's a plain vanilla ETF. However, if you do not report that to the United States, your taxes and fines could actually be equivalent to up to 50% of your holdings. So you have to be very careful and very particular about what you report back to the U.S. government and making sure that your advisors are aware of it as well.
Yep.
We have this conversation.
You were mute there. Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, and I think this also speaks to making sure that you've got the right type of answer that you. We have this conversation all the time with EB-5 clients, and that you need to talk to an immigration attorney on its broadest sense, yes, but what you really need is an EB-5 because it's a very specific petition that you're putting through, and there's specific work that these types of professionals are going to work with. If you're coming to the United States, you need to work with an advisor who is going to be able to help you with your taxes, but really you need to work with someone who is a cross-border expert who knows the right questions to ask. Those are the types of things that help us to protect ourselves from ourselves. Is what should I know that I don't know already?
Here's a great example, Peter, of something that you may not know. And Paul and I were recently working with a client overseas, an Asian country, and when he informed his bank that he was going to become a resident alien in the U.S. and going to do the EB-5 process, understand that your bank may take steps because they don't necessarily want to work with you. So, for example, a lot of banks overseas have reporting requirements that if they have more than 99 American citizens or resident aliens, they have tremendous reporting requirements back to the United States. So if you're considering an EB-5 visa application, you need to also understand what are the impacts going to be with your current investment professionals and your current banks. Because some banks may say if you're becoming a resident alien in the U.S., they're going to require you to move to a different institution.
Yeah, he was given 30 days to close his accounts. So luckily these were personal accounts and easily replicable, but if they were business accounts where there's a lot of stuff going on in payments in and out, it could have been a big problem. So yeah, again, planning.
Yeah, absolutely. So are there any pathways that you guys could, that you talk about frequently with your clients in terms of how you can take steps to protect these assets as you come to the United States, or to better plan for some of the implications that might be coming from your presence in the United States?
Yeah, on the investment side, where Jason was talking before about PFICs, the passive foreign investment corporations. Those are from pooled investments. The other way around it is if you buy individual stocks or bonds. So you can take an index and you can buy the stocks that are in the index just individually in your account and kind of replicate an index, or replicate the top holdings in an index. And that's fine from a US tax standpoint. Is when it's in a pooled vehicle that it becomes problematic. So there are some funds, though there's not many. They can have high minimums that actually do dual reporting. So they report in their home country based on their tax laws and their tax dates, and they also report to the U.S. under U.S. tax paper, under U.S. tax forms. So there are some, and there's getting more and more, but they're still fairly, difficult to find and not that great. The easiest way is either if you're looking to come to the U.S. from basically permanently, bring the bulk of your investment assets to the U.S. If you have assets that you can't, whether operating entities or, one of the things that gets problematic with people and they don't even think about it is retirement plans. Because if you have a retirement plan, you have in the U.S. what we consider a 401k, or your retirement savings through your business or through your employer. Those are typically held in a pooled vehicle, and you cannot take it out when you're below a certain age without penalties. So from a U.S. tax reporting, that actually gets reported as a PFIC, and you get taxed on the appreciation that arises year over year. So that's something where a lot of people don't even think about it because it's a retirement plan. There's no taxes. This is for 20 years from now. I'm not going to even touch it for a long time. But that is something and it's also difficult to move to the U.S. In most cases. So there has to be some careful planning around retirement plans out there if people have them in their home countries, especially if people have sizable plans in their home countries.
Peter, there's a great quote from a tailor or from a construction guy: measure twice, cut once. Right. So I think it's the same when you're thinking about coming to the U.S. Any person who's going down the EB-5 route, you really need to check everything and double check it, because there are so many small details that you may be unaware of that can really catch you unawares. Not that we can't try to ameliorate that situation once we fit, but the more you know up front. So one of the things we recommend is once you're considering this process, you should really have an in-depth conversation with a financial advisor, planner, tax planner in the United States who can really give you, kind of the direction to make sure that you're not going to get caught up in any interesting situations. Is the way I would term it. For example, we had a client recently who they're an oil executive who was working in an overseas company, and their taxes were done by their corporation. Well, when they came to the U.S., everything was fine, but now the wife is still based in the United States, but they're back overseas, and now from the accounting perspective, their corporation is not doing all of the right accounting, and we need to make sure that everything is done properly for the person who's still here in the United States. And more importantly, when this executive comes back to the United States, what are the implications going to be for that person and their taxes and their overseas assets? So like I said, there are so many different, examples of things. I don't know what I don't know. And I would advise anyone who's come to the United States, start to ask those questions. I don't know what I don't know, so what should I know?
Yep.
It sounds like everything that we're talking about is talking about taxes. That's a big part of it, but it's not the entire part of it, right? And your analogy really kind of leads me into maybe another aspect that I think is really important for people, which is the estate management of it all. Because you're coming to the United States, you're coming with your whole family, but it's not always so straightforward that mom, dad, the kids, everyone comes all at the same time. There could be some different schedules as people wind down businesses overseas, but there are implications as they come. But making sure that you have prior planning from the tax side of it, we've talked a good amount about, But from the estate management side of it as well, I think that there's some important considerations to make. The documents that you have, how this is going to affect your spouse and everything. If you guys maybe want to touch on that a little bit more in terms of maybe some of the broader estate management aspects that people can be attuned to.
Yeah, one of the big things we always recommend people do is we want to carefully go through what type of wills and estate planning documents they have in their home country, and either have ideally you have one document that covers your U.S. and your home country assets or your foreign assets, so there's never any not miscommunication, but difference of dispositive provisions. Um, but if that's not possible, we want to make sure that the two documents line up. That if everything's going to, a third, a third, a third to your three children, one of them's not 50%, 25, 25, the other's third, a third, a third, because then it leads to mass confusion of, well, what did mom and dad really want to do? Was it really a third, or was one of them getting 50 and everybody else just getting 25? So we want to make sure that everything there matches up. And then as you do your planning, it's very important to look and understand if you are considered a resident or non-resident in the U.S. at each point in time, because that has a huge implication on what your state taxes could be and whether your worldwide assets or just your U.S. situs assets are going to be taxed. So this is where it's very important working with your accountant, your U.S. accountant, your U.S. estate attorney, and a planner to really understand the not just what your situation is, but what is your resident situation at that, and what is it expected to be for the foreseeable future.